This past June, the Canadian government passed Bill C-18 in the hopes it will be a financial boon to Canada's news outlets. So far, it's not going well. I'm Larry Fedoruk, and this is Later That Same Life. On my weekly podcast, topics, discussions, stories from our lives.
Season 10, Chapter 1.
Online News
Act.
You may have already had this Canadian experience. You see a link on Facebook for a news story that might be of some interest to you. You click on it, and the link or story is unavailable. Why? What happened? Chances are it was blocked by Facebook because of Bill C-18, the so-called Online News Act. What's that? Why does it matter? How will it affect me? I'll try and explore all of that in the next few minutes. Let's start here. News is a business. Not only that, the gathering and dissemination of news is very expensive. You need smart, well-educated reporters and journalists. They have to travel to where the news is. They need expensive technology to get the information back to headquarters. And after that, they need lots and lots of people to package and present it in a way that we can all understand. And news is 24/7, 365. Not that you need that much news, but the news itself takes no breaks. It doesn't get weekends off. The day's top story can happen anywhere at any time. And news outlets have to be ready to get it. That's expensive. For decades, the model was pretty simple. News was gathered and presented in papers, magazines, radio, and television. Newspapers and magazines charged a fee for each individual copy, but like radio and television, their main source of revenue was advertising. Ads. If the ears and eyeballs who wanted news were here and there, then they also had to absorb, hopefully, the ads, the commercials. Commercials and ads themselves became an art form, and at times as interesting as the programs and articles themselves. Year after year after year, we accepted this model. By and large, it worked. We had trusted sources. CBC, BBC, CBS, Time, Newsweek, The Tribune, The Herald, The Chronicle. Separate news-gathering services were also a business model. They were set up to feed the world appetite for the latest. The Associated Press, Broadcast News, others. They didn't work for any one particular outlet. They simply gathered the latest information and charged a fee to smaller organizations who could not afford to have a correspondent in London or Beirut or wherever. Information, news, quickly became a commodity with an assigned dollar value. And, the commercial model is probably still the best way to get it done. Publicly funded broadcasters don't seem to raise enough money. And you certainly don't want the government to own news media. So for now, it's still the free market system. Bill C-18 is the government meddling in that free market system. I don't have to tell you that the world has been spun on its head in the last approximately 15 years. But really, it began, and somewhat unassumingly, in the late 70s and early 80s, when Stephen Jobs, and then a couple of years later, IBM, found out, yes, people actually would like one of those personal computers in their own home. A lot of people didn't even know why they wanted one, but they did. Well, the Bradleys got one, I suppose we should get one. Once a whole bunch of us each had one, we thought, wouldn't it be great if they could all talk to each other? Well, yeah, okay, just plug it into the phone jack. Well, and that's great too, but then I don't have a phone. Let's invent a modem. And while we're at it, let's perfect our cellular technology. And now that we've created this web, which quickly went worldwide, how cool is that? let's create some specific destinations for people. Web sites. Websites about what? Oh, I don't know. Whatever the people are into. Movies, fishing, clothes, cars, other people. Boom. Facebook goes public in 2006. Humanity is changed quickly and forever. That is the nutshell version of the last 40 years on Earth. And I'll only add quickly that the whole modem computer system just ended up in our improved cellular technology for instant access that can be with us all the time wherever we are. At less than 20 years old, Facebook is the granddaddy of all of this mania, and in its own way beget Twitter, Instagram, which it also owns, TikTok, and all the rest. And they have seen their success run parallel to Google and YouTube owned by Google, since Google and Facebook have created their own parent companies, known as Alphabet and Meta, respectively. But for the purpose of this particular podcast, I will continue to refer to them by their brand names, Google and Facebook. During this time, what was happening at traditional media? Magazines, newspapers, radio, TV? Sadly, not much. Oh, sure, in print magazines, they became much more specific. You had a magazine for everything. Hey, did you see the latest Cigar Aficionado? No, I haven't. I'm still reading the new Rollerblading Weekly. Tabloids entered the newspaper game. FM was surging in radio. Cable TV began, including one channel that was all news all the time. But all of these changes were what one might call cosmetic. It was just like a new flavor of Mountain Dew. Yeah, I noticed it. I might try it one day, but it's not going to change my world. It is my opinion, and some of it is gleaned from my own eyewitness accounts, that traditional media remained blissfully unaware of the complete paradigm shift that was happening with the onslaught of connectivity. Even after we all, en masse, started calling it social media, radio, TV, newspapers did not catch on that this was now competitive media. Facebook was now the biggest, most popular radio station in town. YouTube was the largest TV channel. Twitter was your favorite newspaper. But at the time, they just did not catch on. And by the time they actually did catch on, it was too late. They couldn't compete. Even those media outlets that had the foresight to set up their own website were just blown away by Facebook and Google. I know for a fact that when most of these traditional medias set up their own sites, they did not even see them as a possible revenue stream. They saw them as a promotional tool, a tool to help drive people back to the radio or TV station. That would increase the audience because that's what they were selling, advertising based upon the number of people in the audience, the ears, the eyeballs, not clicks. Why, we're not in the click business. They just didn't get it. And as I said, by the time they did, advertisers, who are also pretty short-sighted, they started to say, hey, if I'm going to spend money on digital, why don't I just go with the biggest ones, Facebook, Google, Instagram, YouTube? These were the big marketplaces. And then traditional media did this thing. They caved. They just said, okay, we can't beat them. Join them. How often have you heard someone on radio or TV say, check out our Facebook page, like us on Twitter. Hey, here's what people are doing on Instagram. I've seen news anchors report on and show the latest popular TikTok video. It's like saying, hey, welcome to our program, and now here's something much more interesting on another channel. Why did and does traditional media constantly promote and encourage the use of social media? Because they have given up. They did not take up the challenge when it was first brought. Who knows why? Because at the time they just didn't get it, and they lost. And there's now a permanent new media that they can't ever hope to compete with. So they just rolled over. They lose audience to the new media, which means they lose revenue, which is where Bill C-18, the Online News Act, comes in. News media in Canada, and the rest of the world, frankly, is now crying foul. They are saying that Facebook and Google use links to Canadian news outlets' content without directly compensating the original news outlet for that content. Bill C-18, a federal law, says now they must. Facebook and Google can't just use these links without paying fair compensation to the source. Facebook and Google have responded to Canada by saying, okay, we just won't use them then, because we're not paying. So as a Canadian on Facebook or Google, you won't find links to the CBC, CTV, the Globe and Mail, or your local paper or news radio station. Gone. Someone's post may still be there, but the link will not be available. By the way, same law in Australia. They actually did it first. Same threats back and forth. Eventually, a deal was reached. At the time of this recording, there is no sign that such a compromise can be reached in Canada. Both sides seem to be standing firm. Facebook and Google use links in different ways, but there are similarities. Many people will also point to the YouTube model. That is, I share my content on YouTube, and eventually, if enough people watch my content, YouTube can sell some advertising based on those numbers, and I will share some of that revenue. We'd all like to become millionaire YouTubers, right? It's possible. People have done it because they share revenue. Facebook and Google, however, are different. Links to Canadian news content is not what drives traffic to these sites. It's not how they make their money. It's not even close. As a matter of fact, Facebook doesn't post news links at all. Their users do. Google does, in fact, post some links under Google News. But you know what? If your story from your news outlet is at the top of Google News that morning, it's driving people back to your news site. And if you can't monetize that on your own, how is that Google's problem? Radio, TV, newspapers did almost nothing to fully embrace and take advantage of the digital age. They were beaten badly at their own media game. And now they're boo-hooing. And they're asking for a share of the money from another company that they are not entitled to. And somehow our federal government has seen fit to agree and press this into law. Tell me if I've got this right. I think I do. Some traditional media, Bell specifically that I know of, have begun running ads on some of their TV outlets. They are warning Canadians that soon Canadian news content will be blocked on some social sites. So you should download your favorite news app now. Great. You know, that's what you should have been saying 15 years ago, when instead at the time you were saying, hey, follow us on Facebook. Many of these same news outlets actually spend money on Facebook advertising themselves. So as a response to Google and Facebook, some have said, hey, you should pull all of your advertising money from Facebook. I guess. Yeah, that'll show them. But if anything, I'm seeing more Bell Media ads on Facebook than ever before. Not for their news, but, I guess they're saying, how could we not be on Facebook? The biggest marketplace in the world. From Facebook and Google's point of view, I can't speak for them, but here's what I think. They command anywhere between 80 and 90% of every digital advertising dollar. Are they willing to gamble the few dollars that Canada contributes to their overall massive wealth? Probably. Apparently, they are. I will grant that social media slipped in under the radar for a lot of people, especially when it comes to regulations. and I'm not a fan of over-regulation on the free market. But social was like the wild, wild west. They tried to get away with anything they could get away with, including unscrupulous, addictive algorithms, minimal content moderation, and a business model of profit over ethics. I admit I don't know what rules might have prevented all of this, or for that matter, what regulations to apply now that it's almost too late. But Bill C-18, it ain't one of them. It makes no sense. So now I can't share a link on a, say, definitive story on the biography of Robbie Robertson because the news outlet is Canadian and it wants 2 cents a click from Facebook. How bizarre. This entire exercise seems to be a useless little pissing match between large news outlets and giant Googles and mega metas. Because who is really going to get hurt by this? Well, besides you and me, it's the smaller local news media. Granted, many of them have already been swallowed up by giant corp. But the few that remain will never really benefit from any pennies per click they might get from Google or Facebook, but they will be punished by the fact that their links will be blocked by those sites. Radio and TV still has some audience and they can still sell some ads. But local papers, well, no one is really picking one up at the local newsstand anymore, are they? It's all online. And they need those clicks on their site to stay afloat. You know, if you run one of those sites, you know exactly how much traffic you generate per week, per day, per hour, per minute. And you know how much is direct, as in somebody came directly to your news outlet website. And you know how many come to your site from Facebook or Twitter. And by the way, I know it's called X now, but I'm just not ready to call it that yet, so I'm staying with Twitter. For most of these smaller news sites, it's about 50-50. And they just cannot afford to be banned and take the hit. You can bet they were not the ones lobbying the government to pass a law. So it's not about the news, is it? Or fair play, or compensation. It's big media not being able to reward their board of director bonuses to the extent that they would like. Pay us for our content. What? That's not how you make money. You make money by audience. And if someone is going to drive people to your website, oh boy, like I said, they just don't get it. You know, a lot of socially savvy people have built up their small businesses using sites like Twitter and Facebook to their benefit. I can't imagine that if I grew Larry's Cupcake Bakery through Facebook and it was shared, that I should suddenly demand revenue from Mark Zuckerberg? People love my cupcakes, Mark, and it's my cupcakes that are keeping Facebook going. I don't think so. Further, let's say I become a giant cupcake mogul. Zuckerberg might actually have a case for demanding revenue from me, or at the very least saying, hey, Mr. Cupcake, enough free advertising through your posts. Buy some space. Buy some ads. Yet isn't that what news outlets in Canada are demanding? And by the way, many others around the world are watching this. Because if Canada gets its way, every other nation in the world will want the same. This is what is at stake here. It's the news outlets that have to change. Most news organizations are part of a larger conglomerate. I think that for the sake of our information, news divisions should not be considered a large profit center. Hey, you don't have to be a charity or lose money, but news divisions shouldn't be the cash cow. Just like grocery chains. Hey, make a profit, but this is our sustenance here. Corporate greed has no place. Maybe we should have more organizations like Associated Press, Bloomberg, and, freelancers. Do we need 10 competing reporters all trying to get the latest on the drone attack or the wildfire? You've seen the long shots of the big stories, you know. How many news trucks and satellite dishes are parked all along the road? Everybody trying to get the exclusive or be first with the information. Do we need all that? we probably need more than one, maybe even more than two. But 10? More efficiencies in news gathering. And also, news has become so tied to politics. One topic for most of the day, that's it? That's all you got? One topic? Nothing else is happening in the world that you can tell me about? Politics? I know we've got to hold their feet to the fire and keep them honest. Fifth estate and all. But it's too tied to politics right now. It's driving people away from news and also apart from each other. News outlets have much bigger issues than trying to grind a few pennies out of Facebook and Google. As I said, Facebook and Google aren't angels, and they should really start owning up to their own roles in dividing our society. They should also be working on ways to help patch things up again. But this federal law seems inconsequential to any of that. It's not going to help news, it's not going to help social, it's not going to help us. The networks and the news outlets, they have to be as many things to as many people as possible in the time allotted. Whereas everyone's Facebook feed is different than most everyone else's. And it's just for you, based on what you have done previously. News outlets have to compete with that. You can't. Maybe at one time you could have, but you didn't. It's too late. But you could improve your content, your presentations, and your efficiencies to the point where you wouldn't have to lobby for some ridiculous law that affects my freedoms. I'm telling you, news outlets, if you could ever get your act together, that would be news. Our top story today.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. LarryFedoruk37@gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's podcast YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.